In the previous part of this video, we showed you how to create basic data rules to make a REST virtual service behave more realistically. In this part of the video, we'll build on it, adding support for ID generation, datetime functions, or string manipulation. We'll continue where we left off previously with our fraud detection service project. If you don't have the project available, just open the claim processing fraud REST demo from SV Designer's sample projects and select the after second video data model. As you may remember from the previous parts of this video, we left several columns populated with default auto-generated values. So now let's define business logic for these three remaining fields and make them work as specified here. So this one needs to be composed of the first and the last digit of the social security number, prefixed by FD. So seems like an ancient form of load balancing between various departments. For instance, Mr. Holmes gets always investigated by Team FD32. Here, we'll need to make SV generate a sequence of unique IDs prefixed by US for unspecific, FI for falsified identity, and so on. And the last one is the investigation due date, which is always specified relative to now, and again the number of days differs for various fraud types. Okay, what's the best place to factor in this new logic? Well, most of it depends on the fraud type, which sounds really similar to how we set up this rule. So let's perhaps rename it to response post-processing and add the logic here. So firstly, for the assigned group ID, we'll need a portion of the social security number. We'll need the first and the 11th character prefixed by FD. Here you can see some samples being generated on the fly, and you can also get some more details from our online help after clicking here. Secondly, we'll need to set up the report ID, for which we'll use this function, because as per specification we need to generate a unique ID. Well, there's also this random number generator that could also be a good fit for us, but let's not risk ID collisions, however unlikely they are. This cheat sheet from the SV Online Help will help us specify parameters of the generated sequence. Firstly, we'll have to specify the number to start with. Let's start with 0. Then the sequence step will always increment by 1. Now, this is how you tell SV to render the current sequence number, and similar to this sample, we'll also need some custom prefix. So this is how it may look like for unspecific. 0 to start with, step is 1, then the US prefix followed by the rendered number. And similar for falsified identity, and also for other types of fraud. For the last field, we'll use this function that generates a date and time relative to now, whereas this other function generates the same thing but relative to some other field. Again, we'll use a cheat sheet from SV Online Help. This is how you specify the number of days from now, number of hours, minutes and seconds, which will all be zeros for us, and all of that followed by an optional datetime format specification. So this is how it may all look like for falsified identity. 10 days from now, dot 0 hours, minutes and seconds, hash, and now the date format as per specification. Okay, we should be ready to test everything. One option would be to go to the simulation preview, but this time let's go directly to the refund form instead. The problem is the three fields can't be seen anywhere. Never mind, we can always log the raw messages and check them later. So let's switch the message logging on and call up the service. Let's perhaps test it first for repeated offender. Okay, now falsified identity. Well, and let's also test the happy day scenario. Perfect. Now let's see what has been logged. The repeated offender was our first call, so the sequence number is 0. Also, the custom prefix is as specified. The due date is indeed 5 days from now, and the assigned group ID corresponds to the first and the last digit of the social security number as required. The second call was for falsified identity. The sequence increased by 1, which is okay, the prefix is also correct, and the due date as well. And for the happy day scenario, we report unspecific type of fraud with 0 risk. Also, all the other fields look reasonable. So far, we've been using advanced functions for response generation. So at the end, let me also show you what options you do have for advanced row matching. We'll demonstrate it on so-called upcoding. Upcoding is as frequent fraud in health insurance, it apparently got its own term. And it's all about billing cost too high to be true. For instance, it is when you try to charge $500 for a simple ECG. So let's create a rule for it. We'll call it upcoding. Let's add a row for ECG. And now we would need this row to match whenever the claim amount gets over $500 for ECG. So how to do that? For this purpose, you'll need to specify a custom function. Here, you can basically specify any condition you need. This provides us the input formatted as string. This will give us a value formatted as an integer, which is what we need, and we need to have it greater than 500. By the way, these conditions have the SQL syntax, so you can use SQL constructs here if needed. So let's test it from the refund form now. Perfect! You can see that upcoding has indeed been detected. But wait, what if you have a different limit for different treatments or procedures? For example, a limit of $700 for EEG. Well, the correct way of doing this is specifying the limits here. And then using another type of variable, which in this case is data int. So this means do match if what came from the client application on input is greater than the value in data model row. Now let's test on Mr. Holmes again, this time not only for ECG, but also for EEG, which is still okay with 550, but not okay with 750. At the very end, let me comment on functions that you can't see here. You could surely come up with many of these. In this list, we've been making available what our customers have needed most frequently so far. Whatever else, you can accomplish as well by creating a new scripted rule in either JavaScript or C#. But that will be covered separately in the next part of this video.